South Korea's top office slams Japan for its export restrictions on high-tech materials needed for the production of smartphones and displays. It also warns of an unintended boomerang effect on Tokyo itself. Samsung Electronics says its operating profits were more than cut in half on year in the April to June period. The main reasons: weak memory chip and smartphone sales. Sales in general fell over more than 4% over the same period. Plus, the first heatwave warning for the year has just been issued for most of South Korea's central region. The mercury will soar toward 35 degrees Celsius later in the day. So let's start with a 3-month period to forget, really, for South Korea's biggest tech giant, despite a weak domestic currency and a general turnaround in displays. That said, Samsung Electronics operating earnings for the second quarter were better than expected. For more on this, our reporter Kim Da-mi is joining us on the line. So Da-mi, tell us more.
Hi, Mark. Despite global uncertainties like a U.S.-China trade dispute, Samsung Electronics, like you said, did better than market analysts expected, although it suffered a sizable on-year drop in profits. Samsung said on Friday that its operating profit in the April to June period was estimated at around $5.6 billion, and that's around a 56.3% drop from a year ago, but it's up 4% from the previous quarter. The same applies over its overall sales too. Its sales fell more than 4% on year to around $48 billion. However, that's almost a 7% increase on quarter. It sounds like a mixed bag, but its overall performance in the first half of 2019 is a mere 40% of the figures it posted during the same period last year.
So, as expected, it was again these global uncertainties like the US-China trade war that led to this poor on-year performance.
Right. Falling global demand for memory chips on weakening demand from China and falling DRAM prices really hit the country's bottom line. Specifically, DRAM and NAND flash chips, which account for more than 2/3 of Samsung's sales, really dragged on profits. The firm predicted its warnings to recover in the second half, but market analysts expect the memory chip business to remain in a downward trend. And now you might wonder if Japan's unprecedented restriction of exports of high-tech materials to South Korea will affect the country's tech giant. Considering it will take around 90 days for companies to apply for individual licenses to export materials, including semiconductors, the trade dispute between the two countries will not influence Samsung Electronics' performance for the time being, but it might be reflected later. But again, considering the weight of the dispute, market analysts and South Korea's other tech giants are keeping a close eye on the matter. Full earnings data for each of Samsung's divisions is due to be released later this month. That's all from me, Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Da-mi, for putting that report together rather quickly. That information only came out around an hour ago. Now, in other news, breaking its silence, South Korea's presidential office has given its first official response to Japan's unprecedented restriction of exports of high-tech materials to South Korea, as our Kim Da-mi just touched upon there. It's calling Tokyo's move, which took effect on Thursday, a clear violation of international law, and it has vowed to take corresponding measures if necessary. Shin Se-min with the details.
Korea's National Security Council says Japan's export curb on high-tech materials to South Korea is a clear violation of international trade laws and an apparent political retaliation. Chaired by the Presidential National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong, NSC members said Japan's move had vengeful intentions that clearly violates the norms of the World Trade Organization. The presidential office said that the NSC has decided to, quote, actively explore all diplomatic responses to make Tokyo back down. Possible countermeasures include filing for a WTO suit and explaining Seoul's position to other major economies on how Japan's move is unjustified and violates the notion of free trade. Japan recently announced new curbs on the export of 3 key materials to Korean semiconductor and display makers for the manufacture of high-tech devices such as smartphones and displays. Such a move by the presidential office is seen as a way of taking the trade route a notch higher and a sign that Korean government's deliberation over a possible WTO suit may perhaps speed up. On the topic of regional security, NSC members agreed that the recent meeting between the leaders of the 2 Koreas and the U.S. was a historic event. They said it marked the start of a new era of peace and agreed to continue efforts for more Pyongyang-Washington dialogue and the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, continuing with the trade spat between South Korea and Japan, it may be a case of be careful what you wish for. President Moon Jae-in's chief of staff for policy says the latest export restrictions by Japan may cause enormous short-term damage to South Korea, but will ultimately affect Japanese companies as well. He adds that in the longer run, Tokyo's restrictions will also impact the world economy. Lee Seung-jae reports.
In an interview with local broadcaster JTBC on Thursday, Kim Sang-jo, the presidential chief of staff for policy, said Tokyo's export restrictions on semiconductor and display materials to Seoul will not only affect South Korean companies, but cause a major disruption for their U.S. and European counterparts, as well as Japanese firms. The remarks come amid Seoul's strong response to Tokyo's restrictions, as Kim delivered a message that they could harm the global economy as a whole. Kim used the example of DRAM memory semiconductors, which 2 Korean companies account for about 70% of the world's production. He added that if the restrictions are prolonged, there would be considerable economic damage spreading far beyond the region. However, Tokyo's latest actions is something he said he expected. Kim said it's no surprise Japan would target products that cannot be produced domestically and are exclusively supplied by Japan. He added Seoul had been preparing since last year, when there were various indications it would come after Seoul's Supreme Court's compensation ruling in favor of South Koreans forced to work by certain Japanese firms during World War II. Japan's Kyodo News Agency reported Thursday that Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called on South Korea to act in accordance with the international norms of international law, adding the ball is in South Korea's court. Abe's remarks seem to acknowledge that his government's measures came in response to the Supreme Court ruling. Despite Seoul's plans to file a complaint to the World Trade Organization, Abe denies the restrictions violate WTO agreements. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now let's turn our attention to the on-again, off-again US-China trade spat. Beijing's Ministry of Commerce has reiterated the strain US tariffs put on the 2 countries' relationship. The ministry's spokesperson said Thursday that the trade frictions were initially triggered by Washington's imposition of additional tariffs on Chinese goods. He said the tariffs should be lifted as agreed upon during the recent G20 summit in Osaka, so that the 2 countries can resume consultations on the basis of equality and mutual respect. Commenting on President Trump's recent claim that China agreed to purchase large quantities of American agricultural products, the spokesperson said China and the US are strongly complementary in terms of agricultural trade and have enormous room for cooperation. Now, it would appear North Korea's new negotiating team for the North Korea-US nuclear talks is beginning to take shape now. Pyongyang has reportedly notified Washington of its new chief nuclear envoy, a former North Korean ambassador to Vietnam. Kim Myung-gil will be leading the regime's team when it comes to negotiating with US Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Media reports say North Korea has picked its former ambassador to Vietnam, Kim Myung-gil, as its new chief nuclear envoy, who will be the counterpart of the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun. The reports say Kim Myung-gil is replacing the North's special representative for U.S. affairs, Kim Hyuk-chol, who led working-level negotiations in February and was reportedly executed in March in a purge after the Hanoi summit resulted in a deadlock. In an interview Wednesday with Radio Free Asia, senior foreign leadership analyst Ken Goss with the Washington-based CNA Analysis and Solutions said Kim Myung-gil would be the right person to lead the new talks given his experience and rank. Kim Myung-gil was formerly deputy chief of North Korea's mission to the United Nations in New York and has participated in the six-party denuclearization talks. Most recently, he served as ambassador to Vietnam for 3 years and 8 months, including when the Hanoi summit was held in February. Kim Myung-gil returned to Pyongyang in April after finishing his term. There had been speculation that first Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-yi might serve as Bigen's counterpart, but Goss said that's unlikely considering that she outranks Bigen. Instead, Choi will likely wield her influence behind the scenes, tasked with coming up with strategies for the talks. Based on this, the expert said it seems the North has reorganized its negotiating team around Choi's foreign ministry, rather than the United Front Department, the agency that handles inter-Korean affairs and had led the U.S. talks before. Citing a diplomatic source, multiple media outlets in South Korea report that Pyongyang may have informed Washington about its new working-level team last Sunday, the day of their leaders' landmark encounter at the demilitarized zone. As for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, it's speculated that his counterpart in the talks will be North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Switching gears now, South Korea's contents industry, things like music, games, movies and TV shows, has really witnessed explosive export growth over the past few years. Watchers say it's all down to renewed global attention on Hallyu, otherwise known as the Korean wave. And it seems this wave is even bigger than the first, as our Lee Min-sun reports.
Korea's content industry has seen exports boom in recent years thanks to the growing popularity of Korean culture around the world. According to the data released on Thursday by the Ministry of Culture, Sport and Tourism, Korea exported $8.8 billion of contents in 2017. The total amount of exports has been growing steadily since 2013 and saw an almost 50% jump in 2017 from the previous year. By sector, the gaming industry recorded the highest exports with $5.9 billion, followed by characters, knowledge and information, and music. The content industry also saw an increase in domestic sales. Total sales were $96.6 billion, a 6.7% increase from the year before. Domestic sales in 2017 increased in every sector except publications and animations. The gaming industry stood out domestically, with its sales increasing by 20%. Domestic sales volume was the largest in the publishing industry, followed by broadcasting, advertising, and knowledge and information. The ministry conducted its survey on businesses from 9 content industries and combined the result with 2 additional surveys conducted by the movie and broadcasting industries. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
The United States is celebrating its July 4th Independence Day. The biggest celebration has been prepared by the Trump administration in Washington, and it's fair to say the event has triggered a lot of controversy. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Hong Yu. So tell us about some of the questions that are being raised by the president's critics.
Well, the 4th of July celebrations in Washington began with the military parade, featuring flyovers from military planes and a display of tanks. This year's celebration is called Salute to America, an event that President Trump had called the show of a lifetime. Salute to America is different to how the event is celebrated traditionally. Former presidents have kept a low profile during Washington's annual celebration, which usually involves a nonpartisan concert and fireworks. But this year, President Trump has decided to include a military parade and a giant fireworks display and a speech of his own.
Today we come together as one nation with this very special salute to America. We celebrate our history, our people, and the heroes who proudly defend our flag the brave men and women of the United States military.
And some people say such additions have politicized the national holiday, with Trump taking the spotlight in another effort to separate himself from every other president.
What we're about to see is an all-day partisan political extravaganza featuring Donald Trump, paid for by the American taxpayers. That is the first time any president has commandeered the 4th of July for his own purposes.
There were also protests against President Trump nearby the Washington Monument, with baby Trump balloons inflated and some signs that read "Tanks but no tanks."
We're here today because we want to denounce Donald Trump politicizing and militarizing the 4th of July, which is supposed to be a day that we come together for barbecues, tofu burgers, frankfurters, picnics, celebrations, fireworks, and instead he's turned it into a very divisive time.
Trump's extravaganza also raised questions on who will foot the bill. According to the Washington Post, some of the events were paid for using National Park Service's funds used for park maintenance. But Trump downplayed the complaints, tweeting Wednesday that the expenses will be very little compared to what it is worth. A powerful 6.4 magnitude earthquake struck Southern California on Thursday, the strongest quake to hit the region in 2 decades. The quake, which hit at around 10:30 a.m. local time, was centered in the Sierras Valley located west of the Mojave Desert. And it was felt in LA and even as far away as Las Vegas. The trembler was followed by lots of aftershocks, at least 85 according to the U.S. Geological Survey. No reports of the fatalities as of now, but the quake downed power lines, caused rock slides, and sparked building fires. A round quartzite head of the Tutankhamun is due to be auctioned off with an estimate of more than $5 million, despite Egypt's demand for its return. The more than 3,000-year-old sculpture, which features the ancient Egyptian god Amen, is on display at Christie's London auction house. As the masterpiece came onto the market, the Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities said he was disappointed it was going under the hammer, despite protests from government officials and Egypt's embassy in London. However, Christie's says it took the necessary steps to prove its provenance, and the sale is legitimate. It stressed it would never offer a piece where there was any concern about the provenance.
Now, the hot weather is intensifying in South Korea with this year's first heatwave warning just issued for Seoul. Let's see how hot it will get by checking in with our Ji-hyun at the Weather Center. Morning, Ji-hyun.
Good morning, Mark. Well, brace for intense heat and strong sunshine today. Daytime highs in some areas of this country are expected to reach 35 degrees Celsius, and Seoul's heat wave warning comes 11 days earlier than last year. Meanwhile, parts of Gangwon-do and Gyeonggi-do provinces will also deal with sweltering heat throughout the day today. Strong sunshine will be no help. Sunshine will blaze down, boosting UV rays to very high levels, as well as the ozone levels. Top readings will range from 26 to 34 degrees Celsius with plenty of sun, so we'll need cool spots to retreat to during the heat of the day. Also, please take precautions, stay hydrated and avoid caffeinated drinks, and let's stay out of the direct sunshine. We should leave outdoor activities for the cooler parts of the day. And instead of rain, we've seen lots of sun so far this monsoon season. Well, no showers are in the forecast until next Wednesday as for here in Seoul, while the heat is going to persist through early next week. That's all for me at this hour. Stay safe.
Time now for our Life and Info segment where we focus on information useful for your everyday life. Today we're going to be specifically talking about Korea, but if you live in a hot country, it will also come in useful for you as well. I'm happy to say we have our business correspondent Kim Hae-sung joining us in the studio today to discuss ways to block out the sun. And the reason we're talking about this topic with you as the business correspondent is because the sun protection industry is really growing fast in South Korea.
Right, and with that, the first heat wave of the year has been issued here in Korea. So it's not only getting hotter because it's summer, also the sun's rays are getting stronger. And the direct exposure to sun's rays or ultraviolet radiation can cause skin inflammation, skin cancer, or skin aging in the long term. So it's important to really correctly block out the sun. And there are two types of ultraviolet radiation. First is UVA, it's long wave, and ultraviolet B, that's UVB, short wave. Both types damage unprotected skin. SPF, which stands for sun protection factor, is used to protect from UVB, which affects aging and cancer. SPF indicates how long it'll take for UVB rays to redden the skin when using a sunscreen. For instance, someone using a sunscreen with an SPF of 15 will take 15 times longer to redden than without the sunscreen. So the higher the number, the longer it lasts. PA stands for protection factor that protects from UVA rays that affect pigmentation like brown spots. There are mainly three types, PA+, PA++, and PA triple+ here in Korea. Now take a listen to a dermatology expert on how to use sunscreen.
Research shows SPF of 50 or higher is effective. PA triple+ is good enough to protect from UVA, but what matters is how much you apply and how often you apply it. We recommend applying it every 2 hours. You actually need 2 milligrams per square centimeter of skin, but people usually use only a third of the necessary amount. Putting more on than you think is actually important.
Some good tips there from the expert, and it must be said that many Koreans don't actually like their skin to get too tanned anyway. The preference is for a more whiter skin among a lot of Koreans. And there's also this obsession with looking youthful for as long as possible among many in Korea. But when you do go to cosmetic shops here in Korea, it's not just sun cream anymore, is it? You can get sprays, liquids, mists, you name it. But is there a difference between how effective each of these different kind of products are?
Right, the type of products here in Korea has doubled in the last 3 years, and according to research from Euromonitor, the kind of sunscreen products in the sunblock market has grown 30% or 20% in the last 5 years to $800 million in 2017. But the effectiveness of products, be it sun stick or sun cream, which is measured by SPF and PA, they're quite similar. But as the expert said, given that people have to put a lot more than we usually do, cream or liquid is better than mist, as the area mist can cover is smaller.
Okay, and along with the skin, I think it's almost as important to consider your eyes, because they can be affected in a negative way by strong sunlight as well. Can you give us some tips on what to look for when we purchase sunglasses?
Yes, out of the two radiations, UV and UVB, the cornea, we can absorb UVA, which could cause inflammation, cornea-related diseases, or even cataract.
Right.
So there are three things to look for. Number one is to check whether it can block UV of 400 nanometers. 400 is needed to protect your eyes from UVB and UVA. Second, it's interesting, it's the color of the sunglasses. Apparently, out of colors, dark gray, purple, brown, and green, there's a type that your eyes feel most comfortable with.
Everyone has different cells that applies for eyes too. On top of the size of the pupil, it changes sun penetration. The color of sunglasses can affect your eye's stress level. So we recommend customers find a color that suits them and the weight of the glasses that fits them.
Okay, so you need to look for a little sticker that says that it blocks up to 400 nanometers if possible, if the shop has that. And the color of the glasses, that means the lens that's actually in the glasses Right, so you just be vigilant while you're shopping for your sunglasses.
Yeah, and actually the stores, they have a measuring thing, so you can put your sunglasses and see if it covers 400 nanometers.
Right.
So you have to look.
Okay.
You don't have to look at it.
Yeah.
And there are two more things to check. First is to check your sunglasses regularly because there can be scratches on the surface which would affect the effectiveness of sun blocking, and there can be sun penetration. And second is don't leave your sunglasses in the car, especially if you park it outside in the summer. The heat in the car could go up to 40 or even 70 Celsius degrees, which can cause damage to the sunglasses.
Well, I learn something every day. I wasn't aware of that information, so perhaps I should stop leaving my sunglasses in the car. Hae-sung, it was a pleasure to have you in the studio, and thanks for the great tips. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Now, we are going to take a look at the weather in your part of the world. Well, that's all we have for now on this Friday morning here in Seoul. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. Our next newscast is at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. But if we don't see you, have a wonderful weekend. Until next time, goodbye.